The collection we've got here today is one that belonged to a man called Heinrich Rothberger. We have some wonderful, wonderful objects, and we have an incredible story that goes with it. And that story really begins when his father came to Vienna in the 1840s. On the one hand, you had the tradition of the empire, but on the other hand, it was a really avant-garde place as well in terms of art and science and things like that. So it was a very exciting time, and it was in this kind of ferment that Heinrich began collecting porcelain. What makes Heinrich exceptional is that he was one of the first collectors who was really interested and understood the early Viennese porcelain, and he collected the best early pieces, and he was really a prescient and knowledgeable collector in that respect. In 1938, of course, when the Nazis marched into Austria, the trouble really began, and Jewish families like the Rothbergers came under enormous pressure, and their rights very quickly were stripped away. What happened then is a depressingly familiar story, unfortunately. By the end of 1938, his collection was confiscated and he no longer had any control over his own possessions. After the war, he obviously tried to recover what parts of his collection he could. While they returned some of his porcelain, the most important things, such as the elephant, the equelle and cover that we've got here, they decided to keep until actually the turn of the millennium, believe it or not, when Heinrich's niece, whose name was Bertha, decided to try to correct that injustice that had happened to her uncle. I was lucky enough to meet Bertha Gutmann in the late 1990s. She was an amazing woman. She was absolutely devoid of any bitterness about her fate as a child, the fate of her family, considering that both her parents had been killed in the war. And that was really quite an extraordinary thing, I thought. They decided in 2000 to return these pieces to Bertha Gutmann. And so in a nice closing of the circle, the pieces that she'd seen as a little girl in Vienna in her uncle's apartment before the war came back to her. And one of her favorite pieces, she told me, was the elephant. All of them are important. If you had to choose one, maybe the little equelle cover and stand, what's really important about it, apart from its beautiful Baroque design, is that it's signed by the artist. And on 18th century porcelain, this is unbelievably rare. This particular artist, Jacobus Helchis, only 3 pieces are signed by him that we know about, and 2 of them, including this equelle, are in Heinrich Rothberger's collection. One of the most interesting and charming pieces is perhaps the elephant. It's an amazing, naturalistic, large-scale model of an elephant, and you have to remember, to fire a piece of porcelain that big is very, very difficult now, and at the time in the 18th century, it would have been almost a miracle. Well, the final piece is called a Baudelaire. It's named after a French priest, and he was famous for his gripping and lengthy sermons. And they were so lengthy, apparently, that the ladies in the congregation, rather than having to excuse themselves from time to time, would take along a Baudelaire. Porcelain at this time was so precious, it was like gold, that I think this was a display object, something which was amusing and charming, and it was a bit of a joke. It's painted most exquisitely, and you can see the joke continues with a child and a monkey on each side, and I think the monkey's even picking fleas off the child. It's a wonderful, wonderful object, and it has a terrific history. It's very exciting to be able to offer such an amazing group of pieces which have been on an incredible journey. They started in one of the great pre-war Viennese collections, and other collectors will have the opportunity to continue that journey.